Now let's talk about bladder 64, a Yuan-Source point. Bladder 64 is located on the lateral aspect of the foot, distal to the tuberosity of the fifth metatarsal bone. How to find bladder 64? When palpating along the lateral aspect of the foot on the level of the border of the red and white skin, a bony structure can be felt approximately at the midpoint of the foot. This is the tuberosity of the fifth metatarsal bone. Bladder 64 is located directly distal to it, that means towards the toes, at the junction between the base and the shaft of the fifth metatarsal bone. Bladder 63 is located proximal to the tuberosity of the fifth metatarsal bone in a depression between the calcaneus and cuboid bone, or between the tuberosity and the cuboid bone. Spleen 4 is located in a comparable position on the medial aspect of the foot in a depression distal to the base of the first metatarsal bone. Needling vertically 0.3 to 0.5 Chun. Actions or indications. Bladder 64 clears wind and heat from the head and eyes, calms the Shen, opens the channel. Special feature, it is a Yuan-Source point. Bladder 64 is the source point of the bladder. Like many source points of yang channels, in contrast to those of the yin channels, it is not usually used to tonify the relevant organ. Bladder 64 is a useful point to subdue rebellious chi from the head, that is causing headaches and dizziness, and liver wind causing tremor of the head when both occur against the background of kidney deficiency. Bladder 64 can stimulate the water passages of the lower burner when used in conjunction with triple burner 4. Bladder 64 subdues rebellious chi from the head. So that means it's good for headache, dizziness, redness of the inner canthus of the eye. It extinguishes interior wind, as in tremor of the head, epilepsy, calms the mind, like palpitations, insomnia, manic depression, and fright. And bladder 64 can stimulate water passages of the lower burner when you combine bladder 64 with triple burner 4. Bladder 64 is the Yuan-Source point of the bladder channel, and like most of the distal bladder channel points, treats fullness of the head. This fullness may be due to attack of exterior pathogenic wind or wind heat, to stirring of interior wind, to upsurging of yang due to kidney deficiency, or simply to disharmony of upper and lower parts of the body. Excess above manifests as heat, pain and heaviness of the head, splitting headache, shaking of the head, rhinitis with ceaseless or non-stop nosebleed, whilst deficiency below gives rise to cold feet. The bladder channel ascends to the inner canthus, and bladder 64 is indicated for eye disorders like visual dizziness, redness of the inner canthus, and superficial visual obstruction. The bladder primary channel enters the brain, whilst the bladder divergent channel enters the heart. And like several distal bladder channel points, bladder 64 is indicated for palpitations, heart pain, epilepsy, and mania depression. Bladder 64 is indicated for stiffness, pain, and contraction along the course of the bladder channel from the neck to the feet. Bladder 64 can strengthen the bladder and can be used for general stiffness or lack of secretions in the system, leading to stiff neck, torticollis, lower back pain, dimness of vision, or cataracts. Bladder 64 is a distal point and can be used if the inner canthus of the eye has become red and dry. Consider where there is no desire for food and drink. Bladder 64 is helpful for sensations of cold in the legs. It is said to help the bladder official in storing the collective memory of all the officials. Bladder 64 is often used with kidney 3. As the Yuan-Source point, bladder 64 is a great point to harmonize and revitalize the bladder. It will bring to the bladder the original qi, accessed at Yuan-Source points with all its strengthening and balancing effects. A great point to steady and reassure the person by connecting them back to their fundamental qi. It will soothe and root them. When fear has started to mount, and agitation, suspicion, or mental rigidity is growing, bladder 64 will balance the person and settle the spirit, enabling them to soften and relax and reassemble as necessary. Bladder 64 can allow the person to catch his breath and luxuriate for a moment, connected to this deep aspect of the qi. This balancing effect also helps to clear the brain, so thought and behavior regain fluidity and integration. As the Yuan-Source point, bladder 64 will regulate functioning of the bladder, allowing this official, which removes water by qi transformation, to fulfill its many responsibilities, including holding our reserves for us and acting as the archivist, storing the collective memory of the officials. As a distal point on the bladder meridian, it will affect the head, clearing mental stagnation, heaviness, or heat. Hence, it helps nosebleeds and headaches. From the bladder pathway, the eyes can be affected and cleared. It strengthens the back. Bladder 64 clears heat from the bladder and is used for burning sensation on urination. Bladder 64 clears wind and is used for epilepsy. It harmonizes and tonifies the bladder and relaxes the sinews.